I found her account by accident. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just scrolling, letting the algorithm guide me in a haze of boredom late one night. I had typed my own name into the search bar, mostly out of curiosity, a strange ritual I performed now and then to see what the internet thought of me. But nestled between the familiar tags and posts, there it was, an unfamiliar handle, a small circular icon showing the back of a woman's head, her hair braided and resting between her shoulder blades, her skin catching a sliver of golden light from an unseen window. At first, I didn't know why I clicked. The name meant nothing. The photo was artistic, anonymous, but something about the shape of her neck, the slope of her shoulder, it tugged at something buried in memory. The page loaded slowly, as if aware of the weight of what it was about to reveal. The grid appeared. Photo after photo, none showing a face. Bodies in motion and in stillness, in shadows and sunlight, often clad in sheer fabrics or nothing at all. Thighs spread beneath silk sheets, fingers gripping the edge of a bathtub, breasts cupped by unfamiliar hands. Every image was artfully composed, erotic without being pornographic, deliberate without losing intimacy. It took me several heartbeats to realize what I was seeing and who I was seeing. It was her. Not instantly, not obviously, but once the recognition clicked, it was impossible to unsee. That scar above her hip bone, barely visible in the blur of motion. The tiny mole near her navel. The way her hands curved inward when relaxed. She had always had a dancer's grace, even when she wasn't trying. And now here she was, framed in soft lighting and provocative angles, offering glimpses of herself to an audience I hadn't known existed. The account had thousands of followers. The comments were full of praise, admiration, lust. Men and women alike left heart-eyed emojis, poetic confessions, offers. I felt myself spiral, not out of jealousy, not exactly, but out of a deep, low thrum of something I couldn't name yet. I scrolled for over an hour, unable to stop. Each image seemed to pull me further into something I wasn't ready to admit. Her body was familiar and strange, sacred and profane. I knew this woman. She was family, distant but close enough to remember summers together, holidays, long afternoons when we were still girls. I remembered the way she used to laugh with her mouth wide open, the way she clutched my hand when we watched scary movies. But now I was seeing her in a way that unraveled all those shared memories, twisting them into something far more intimate. I looked at the timestamps. This wasn't something she had done once or twice. This was consistent, curated. There were stories attached to some of the posts, short captions in lowercase letters, fragments of thought. Some of them read like poetry. Others were confessions, fantasies, fragments of nights she'd lived or imagined. I read each one carefully, feeling like an intruder but unable to look away. I was watching her expose herself to the world, and yet somehow it felt like she was speaking only to me. The images weren't explicit in the way cheap content is. They were far more dangerous because they were beautiful. Shot in soft hues with careful framing, they invited the viewer in without ever quite giving everything away. A bare shoulder, the swell of a breast beneath a sheer top, her thighs wrapped in silk stockings, a hand holding a ripe peach positioned suggestively between her knees. It wasn't about the flesh. It was about the suggestion, the invitation, the control. And that's what struck me most. She was in control. This wasn't exploitation. It wasn't desperation. It was power. Hers. By the time I closed the app, I was trembling. My hands felt foreign to me, my breath too shallow. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd seen, what I felt. My chest was tight, not from panic, but from something else, something warm and dark and curling just beneath my skin. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, about the curve of her back, the arch of her foot against cool tiles, the way her fingers traced the line of her thigh. I had seen that body at family gatherings, in swimsuits and sundresses, leaning against door frames with effortless confidence. But now it was layered with a kind of danger I hadn't anticipated. I started to feel ashamed, not because she had made the content, but because of how I reacted to it. Because I saved the account. Because I went back to it the next night. Because I zoomed in. Because I imagined what her skin felt like under those soft lights. I wondered what it meant. For her. For me. For everything I thought I knew about how I looked at women. I had never let myself ask certain questions, and now it was like someone had whispered the answer straight into my bloodstream. The next morning, I saw her name in my phone. She had texted me 2 days ago, just something casual. She was coming into town, needed a place to stay. I said yes. Before I even finished reading the message, I said yes. I told myself it was family, it was familiar, it was harmless. But I knew. I already knew. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, suitcase rolling behind her, sunglasses perched on top of her head, smile easy like it had always been. The familiarity of her presence wrapped around me like a blanket pulled from storage, warm, worn, full of memories I hadn't touched in years. Her hug was tight, brief, and entirely too normal. There was no hesitation in her voice, no crack in her tone. She didn't look like someone who had secrets threaded through the seams of her skin, but I knew better now. She unpacked in the guest room, or what had always been the guest room, which now felt like a staging ground for something neither of us dared to name. I passed by the open door and saw her laying her clothes out across the bed. Casual pieces, loose shirts, soft tank tops, underwear folded like they meant nothing. My eyes lingered too long on a pair of black lace panties, delicate and barely there. I turned away quickly, ashamed of the heat that pulsed at the base of my spine. That evening, we cooked dinner together like we had many times before. She stood barefoot in my kitchen, chopping vegetables with the same easy rhythm I remember from childhood holidays. I found myself studying her arms, the slight muscles flexing under smooth skin, the dip of her waist as she leaned to reach something on a lower shelf. She moved with confidence, with casual sensuality, as if her body existed without shame. And I was beginning to realize how little I could say the same for mine. We sat on the couch afterward, wine glasses in hand, some sitcom playing in the background. She tucked her legs beneath her, her shirt riding up slightly to expose a sliver of stomach. I tried not to stare, but my eyes betrayed me. Every time she shifted, I felt my breath hitch. I noticed things I never should have noticed. The way her fingers curled around the stem of her glass, the soft curve of her knee brushing against mine when she laughed. Her skin smelled faintly of coconut and something warmer, maybe vanilla, and it clung to the fabric of the room. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional creak of the floorboards from down the hall. I could picture her in the guest room, maybe brushing her teeth in front of the mirror, maybe undressing slowly, piece by piece, sliding out of her shirt, unclipping her bra, stepping out of her underwear. The thought invaded me like a slow fever. I shifted under the covers, my thighs pressing together, my hands restless. I told myself to stop thinking, to sleep, but the images kept coming, vivid and pulsing. Her skin against my sheets, her mouth parted, her fingers moving with intention. The next morning, I woke up early, unable to stay in bed any longer. I wandered into the kitchen in my robe, thinking I would be alone. But she was already there, dressed in one of my oversized t-shirts, standing at the stove with her hair pulled into a messy bun. The shirt clung to her thighs and rose slightly when she reached up to grab something from the cabinet. I froze in the doorway, trying to compose myself, hoping she hadn't seen the flicker of surprise or want cross my face. She turned and smiled, held up a mug of coffee like nothing was out of place, like she hadn't just altered the gravity of the room by standing in it. I took the mug, our fingers brushing, and I felt it again, that same surge, that same awareness that had taken root in me since the night I found her account. Throughout the day, it only grew worse, or better, or more unbearable. I caught glimpses of her reflection in the hallway mirror, her fingers tapping against her phone, nails painted a soft shade of pink, her bare legs stretched out across the arm of the couch as she scrolled through a playlist. I noticed the way her body moved when she danced absent-mindedly to music playing through her earbuds. She moved like she didn't care who was watching, but I was watching all the time. That night, she lounged across the couch, head resting on a throw pillow, one leg hooked over the armrest. The hem of her shorts had ridden up. She didn't adjust them. She didn't seem to mind. I sat nearby, flipping through a book I wasn't reading, pretending not to look. But my eyes kept drifting to the edge of her thigh, to the faint outline of her nipple beneath her thin tank top, to the spot where her neck met her shoulder, exposed and perfect. At one point, she turned her head and caught me, just briefly. Her eyes met mine, held them for a second, maybe two, then returned to her phone without comment. But something passed between us, a shift, a thrum. I felt it settle in my stomach like a swallowed stone. That night in bed, I touched myself for the first time in weeks. Slowly, quietly. I imagined her mouth, her hands, the weight of her on top of me. I came silently, biting my lip, heart pounding like I'd committed a crime. I lay there afterward, staring at the dark ceiling, hand still between my thighs, ashamed and aching, and more alive than I had felt in a very long time. The next morning, she walked into the living room wearing nothing but a towel. It clung to her damp skin, her collarbones glistening, droplets trailing down the sides of her thighs. She asked me something mundane, something about breakfast, but my mind was blank. I nodded. I watched. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my coffee. She smiled, not mockingly, but with something else behind it, something knowing. I realized then that this wasn't just in my head. She knew. She must have known. Maybe she'd known the moment I said yes to her visit. Maybe she knew the moment she posted those photos. And yet, neither of us said anything. We just continued existing in the same space, breathing the same air, touching nothing, wanting everything. It started on a Sunday evening, slow and lazy, with the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred. The sky outside was fading into that soft blue that comes before night, and the apartment was wrapped in a calm hush. We'd spent most of the day doing nothing, grocery shopping, flipping through magazines, listening to music with long silences in between. It was the kind of rhythm we had fallen into without ever really talking about it. I had made dinner, she had done the dishes. Now we were on the couch, half watching a movie neither of us had picked, the glow of the screen flickering against her skin. She stretched out, her legs across my lap, toes pressing into the edge of my thigh, her heel nestled into the bend of my knee. It wasn't unusual. We'd sat like this before, dozens of times, maybe hundreds. But tonight, something was different. Or maybe I was just finally allowing myself to feel what had always been there. I let my hand rest lightly on her ankle, fingers splayed, casual. My eyes stayed on the screen, but my attention was on the slow movement of her foot, the way she shifted slightly, her skin warm beneath the pads of my fingers. I traced a lazy circle with my thumb over the delicate bone above her heel. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, she moved again, a small adjustment. Her thigh pressed deeper into my lap, and her other foot nudged closer. I followed the curve of her calf without thinking, hand drifting higher, moving past the line where skin met fabric. The hem of her shorts was soft, worn cotton. I could feel the heat of her body through it, that living warmth that makes you forget everything else. My hand paused just beneath the fabric, fingers resting lightly against the inside of her knee. She was still, silent. The movie played on, some muffled dialogue and laughter that barely registered. I was breathing through my nose, slow and shallow, trying not to give myself away. My pulse beat in my ears, in my fingertips. I moved again, higher. My palm slid against the curve of her thigh, skin smooth and warm. The edge of her shorts gave way just enough for my knuckles to brush skin I hadn't touched before. The sensation was electric, the softness, the tension just beneath the surface. I wasn't sure if I was shaking or if the couch had dipped slightly when she shifted again. I didn't dare look at her. My gaze stayed forward, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere darker, hungrier. Her body was relaxed but alert, like she was aware of every inch I touched. Her breathing was still steady, but there was a different rhythm to it. She moved again, just slightly, as if inviting me to continue. Or maybe I only imagined it. I let my fingers trace slow lines up and down the side of her thigh, feather-light, barely there. I could feel the heat radiating through the fabric. My hand slid inward until I was pressed gently against the seam between her legs. Just pressure, just presence. She didn't move, didn't react, but I could feel something had changed. I stayed there, hand resting, my thumb grazing small circles into the cotton. The tension in my body was unbearable. My thighs clenched, my mouth dry. I could feel my own pulse thudding low in my stomach, a dull ache building from somewhere I hadn't touched in too long. Then she exhaled, long and slow, and shifted again. This time, her legs opened just slightly, so small a movement I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it, feeling for it. My breath caught. The fabric of her shorts was thinner there, stretched, and I could feel everything. The curve of her, the warmth, the sudden dampness that bloomed through the cloth like a secret she couldn't hide anymore. I stayed frozen, terrified, turned on, drenched in heat and disbelief. My fingers twitched. My thumb pressed a little deeper into the damp cotton. She inhaled, sharp and quiet, then settled again. It felt like an hour passed in a single minute. I could hear nothing but the sound of our breathing and the static hum of the television. I wanted to push further. I wanted to slip my fingers under the fabric, to feel her skin without anything between us. I wanted to taste the heat I could only imagine. But I didn't. Instead, I let my hand rest there, heavy with tension, every muscle in my body screaming with restraint. My eyes burned, my thighs ached, my skin felt too tight. I could smell her, the faint, earthy sweetness that had become familiar in the most inappropriate ways. Eventually, the credits rolled, and she sat up slowly. My hand fell away, limp, unsure of what it had just done or what it now meant. She stretched her arms over her head, yawned, and stood. She didn't say anything, didn't glance back. She just walked down the hall to the bathroom, her silhouette soft in the dim light. I sat there, my palm still tingling, my heart pounding wildly. I pressed my thighs together and exhaled shakily. I hadn't crossed a line, not entirely, but I had leaned so close to it that I could feel the heat rising from the other side, and she had let me. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the memory of her scent lingering on my fingertips. I kept replaying the way her body had moved, the way she had responded, or hadn't, or had. I wasn't sure anymore. My body thrummed with unspent energy, with need I hadn't admitted aloud even to myself. She knew, I knew, we both knew, but neither of us said a word. It was late, later than usual for us to still be up, but neither of us had made a move to say goodnight. The lights were low, just the lamp in the corner casting a soft amber hue across the room. The TV was on, volume low, playing something neither of us were really watching. She was curled into one end of the couch, blanket draped over her legs, her tank top slipping just slightly off one shoulder. I sat beside her, one knee tucked under me, pretending to scroll through my phone, but not seeing anything on the screen. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It had shifted into something expectant, something dense with everything we weren't saying. We had been living in this limbo for days, maybe weeks, the air thickening with each accidental touch, each glance held too long. I had memorized her habits, her rhythms, the way she bit her nail when she was thinking, the way her hair curled against her cheek when she was tired. But tonight, something inside me felt different. Not braver, not clearer, just heavier. Like if I didn't act now, something inside me would splinter. She reached for her wine glass, and her thigh brushed against mine. Not hard, not intentional, but enough. I set my phone aside, barely breathing. She didn't pull away. I let my hand slide onto her knee under the blanket, slow, tentative. Her skin was warm, and she was still, the kind of stillness that isn't passive, but listening. Her breath caught, just slightly. I moved my hand higher, fingers grazing the inside of her thigh. The cotton of her sleep shorts was thin, barely a barrier. I kept my eyes on the screen, but my focus was locked on every inch of space between her body and mine. I could feel the heat radiating off her skin. She shifted slightly, not away, but inward, knees angling toward me under the blanket. That small movement burned through my restraint. My hand slipped between her legs, the backs of my fingers brushing along the seam of her shorts. She inhaled, sharp and shallow. I didn't press. I just let my fingers rest there, my palm flat against her inner thigh. The space between our bodies was charged, humming. The couch seemed suddenly too narrow, the room too small, my skin too tight. She turned her head slightly. I could feel her looking at me, but I couldn't meet her gaze. I didn't trust myself to see what was there. I focused on her breathing, the rhythm of it shifting with every inch I moved. I let my fingers trace up, dragging softly over the cloth, until I felt the warm dampness spreading beneath the fabric. It was like a pulse, her body answering a question I hadn't dared to ask. I stayed there, touching nothing and everything, my fingertips tracing slow, deliberate lines along the edge of her shorts, feeling her twitch under the weightless pressure. Her hips lifted slightly, so slightly it could have been imagined, but I knew it wasn't. My other hand reached up and rested on her stomach, fingers splayed wide, grounding her, anchoring me. I wanted to go further, to slip my hand beneath the waistband, to feel her fully, skin to skin, but I didn't, not yet. I pressed the heel of my hand softly against her, letting the heat bloom through the cotton, and she let out a breath that was almost a sound, almost a plea. Time slowed. The room faded. The TV flickered. But all I could hear was her breath. All I could feel was her body responding to mine, even through the barrier of fabric. My fingers moved in small, rhythmic circles, not urgent, not rushed. I felt her thighs tremble, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket, knuckles white in the dark. I pulled back before either of us could fall over the edge. My hand retreated, resting on my own thigh, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the room. She didn't move. Her chest rose and fell, eyes still on me. I didn't look. I couldn't. I was afraid that if I saw her face, I'd reach for her again, and this time I wouldn't stop. She stood up a few minutes later, silent. No words, no questions. She walked slowly down the hallway, hips swaying gently, the hem of her shorts clinging to her curves. I watched her disappear into the dark. I sat alone on the couch for a long time, fingers still tingling, thighs pressed tightly together. I could still smell her, taste her breath on the air. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew what had just begun couldn't be undone. And I didn't want it to be. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing ever does. It slipped in quietly, like a fog rolling low over familiar streets, gentle, unassuming, but impossible to ignore once it settled. After that first night, something between us cracked open, and neither of us tried to close it again. We didn't speak about it, we didn't name it, but our bodies remembered, and they kept remembering. It began in subtle ways, her hand brushing mine at the kitchen sink, her shoulder pressed lightly into mine when we stood too close in front of the stove, her leg resting against mine under the table, her toes tracing idle patterns on my shin. Every contact seemed innocent enough, but I knew better now. I felt this shift in my bones, in the way I breathed when she was near. I started dressing differently. Not dramatically, but deliberately. Softer fabrics, lower necklines, shorts that clung more than they needed to. And she noticed. She didn't say anything, but I felt it. In her eyes, in the way her gaze lingered a second too long, in the way her breath caught when I leaned over her on the couch or bent to pick something up off the floor. The next time it happened, it was quiet. It was morning, and I was still in my robe. She was sitting at the table with her legs crossed, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. I walked behind her, letting my hand brush across her bare shoulder as I passed. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to expose her neck. My fingers stopped there, curved lightly against the curve of her throat. She didn't move. I leaned down and pressed my lips to the spot just beneath her jaw. Her body responded before her mind had time to catch up. A soft exhale, a shiver I felt more than saw. I kept going, kissing down her neck, letting my hand slide over her chest, her heartbeat fluttering beneath my palm. She stood without a word, took my hand, and led me back to the bedroom. It became a rhythm after that, a quiet, electric rhythm pulsing just beneath the surface of everything we did. In the afternoons, she would nap on the couch, and I would lie beside her, tracing the lines of her body through her clothes, memorizing every dip, every rise. At night, she would crawl into my bed, her skin warm from the shower, her body finding mine beneath the sheets with effortless precision. We moved together like we'd done it 100 times, though we were still discovering each other in fragments, fingertips and mouths and long, aching silences. There was a comfort to it, but it was laced with urgency, with a hunger that never seemed to dull. She liked to tease, to stretch the space between want and satisfaction until I was trembling. She would kiss me slowly, take her time undressing me, then stop just short of what I needed. Her hands would hover, her breath brushing my skin like a promise, and I would beg without words, arching into her touch, chasing something she made me feel like I'd never deserved before. When she finally gave in, it was never rushed. It was reverent. Her fingers moved with intention. Her mouth learned every part of me. I came undone in pieces, quietly, repeatedly, until I forgot how it felt to be untouched. I began to crave the details, the way her back arched when I kissed her stomach, the tiny scar beneath her left breast, the sound she made when I pulled her thighs apart and pressed my tongue against the center of her. I learned how to read her body like a language, how to listen without asking. She taught me what it meant to give without fear, to take without guilt. It wasn't always soft. Some nights it was desperate, rushed, clothes half removed, furniture pushed aside. I once pulled her into the laundry room and kissed her against the washing machine, her legs wrapped around my waist, my hands under her shirt. Another time, she pushed me down onto the kitchen table and straddled me, riding my thigh while her teeth grazed my shoulder, her moans swallowed in my mouth. These moments felt like confessions spoken through sweat and friction, louder than words could ever be. But it wasn't just about sex. It was in the ordinary, too. In how she started using my toothbrush when she forgot hers. In how our laundry mixed together in the basket. In how I started making her coffee without asking how she wanted it. Her hair would clog the drain and I'd clean it without thinking. She would wear my clothes around the house and never give them back. One morning, I woke up to find her cooking eggs in just one of my oversized t-shirts. And something about that simple image undid me completely. She was here. She was inside my life in ways that felt permanent. We didn't call it anything. There were no labels, no boundaries. She still left the apartment during the day, still had her own friends, her own life. But every night she came back to me, slipped under my sheets, laid her head on my shoulder, and every time she touched me, it felt like the first time all over again. Sometimes I would watch her sleep, just lay there in the dark, memorizing her profile, the way her lips parted slightly, the way her chest rose and fell in rhythm with mine. I would run my fingers down her spine, feeling the softness of her back, the slow warmth of skin against skin. There were nights I wanted to wake her, just to hear her say my name in that breathless way again, just to feel her body respond to mine like it always did. I was falling into her, completely, quietly, over and over, and I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to pull back. It had already become a part of me, the way her body fit against mine, the scent of her skin, the taste of her mouth after midnight. She was a habit now, one I had no intention of breaking. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a decision. There was no dramatic moment, no confession over candlelight, no whispered declarations in the dark. It simply continued, as if once the boundary had been crossed, there was no need to define what we were walking into. The night blurred into morning, the space between our bodies shrinking until there was no distinction between hers and mine. It became our rhythm, waking up tangled in sheets, sharing breath before the day began, brushing our teeth side by side in sleepy silence. I started forgetting what life had looked like before she arrived. My routines had shifted to fit around her presence without resistance. The towels on the bathroom hook now always came in twos. My groceries were her preferences. My playlist evolved with her humming in the background. Her bras mixed with my sweaters in the laundry. Her jewelry littered the bathroom sink. My world no longer echoed with solitude. It pulsed with her in it, layered through every moment of the day. There were times I would stand in the hallway and hear her in the next room, singing under her breath, talking on the phone, humming as she got dressed. Those sounds anchored me. I started associating home with the cadence of her movement, the weight of her presence. The air shifted differently when she entered a room, like the atmosphere adjusted to her. And I did too. But it wasn't just comfort. There was a wildness under it, something unspoken. Some nights she'd crawl into my bed with her skin still damped from a bath, and I'd feel my pulse race before she even touched me. She knew exactly how to unravel me. There was nothing tentative anymore, nothing uncertain. She'd press me into the mattress, her hands strong, her mouth unrelenting, her breath hot against my throat. I'd dig my nails into her back, my thighs wrapping around her hips, pulling her deeper, closer, always closer. Other nights, she was soft, quiet, almost reverent. She would lay between my legs, her hands cupping my thighs, her mouth patient and slow, tasting every inch like a language only she knew. I stopped keeping track of the number of times she made me come. It wasn't even about release anymore. It was about surrender, about letting her have every part of me. And I gave it again and again until I didn't know where I ended and she began. The days passed like that, one folding into the next. Nothing changed, and yet everything had. We never labeled it. We never announced it to anyone. It lived in the quiet, in the space between her lips and my collarbone, in the way we reached for each other under the covers. I stopped expecting her to leave. She stopped pretending she wasn't staying. Then, one night, something shifted. I was sitting on the bed, folding laundry. She walked into the room with her phone in her hand, smiling at something, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked radiant, ordinary, real, effortless. She tossed the phone onto the bed and pulled the towel free, shaking out her curls. That's when I saw the notification flash on the screen. A name I didn't recognize, a message, a heart emoji. I didn't react, not outwardly. I picked up a t-shirt, folded it in half. But inside, something paused. I told myself not to look. I told myself it didn't matter. But later, after she fell asleep beside me, I reached for her phone and looked. Just one thread, one conversation, a series of flirty messages, a photo. Not explicit, but intimate, familiar, her lips slightly parted, her shirt off one shoulder, taken in my apartment, in my mirror. I stared at it for a long time. My chest didn't burn with jealousy. It twisted with something darker. Not betrayal, but exposure. Like a veil had been lifted, and I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Not because she had kept it hidden, but because I had refused to ask, refused to know. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask for explanations. I simply slid the phone back onto the nightstand and lay there in the dark, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. My fingers curled into fists beneath the sheets. I could still feel her hands on my skin from hours before, still taste her on my tongue, still smell her in the pillow beside me. And that's when I realized this had never been about exclusivity. It had never been about promises. It was about presence, about access, about the way we filled each other's space so completely that it didn't occur to me she might also be filling others. The next morning, nothing changed. She made coffee, kissed me on the shoulder, sat across from me at breakfast, her feet tangled with mine beneath the table. Her eyes were soft, open, unbothered. I watched her smile at something on her phone, and I said nothing. I smiled back. We continued. with the same quiet rhythm, the same hungry nights, the same tenderness, the same heat. But now there was something else beneath it, a shadow, a silence that wasn't emptiness, but weight. I carried it in my throat, in my hands, in the way I gripped her tighter when she came apart beneath me, as if that might keep her from slipping through my fingers entirely. She was still there, still in my bed, still in my life. But now I saw the edges, the blur where I'd painted her as mine, the soft places I had built around a version of her I wanted to believe in. And I didn't stop. I didn't leave. I didn't tell her to go. Because the truth was, I didn't want an ending. I didn't know what came after this, and I wasn't ready to find out. So I kept folding her clothes. I kept cooking for two. I kept holding her at night, even when my arms ached from the weight of what I wasn't saying. I kept loving her in silence, because even if I wasn't the only one, I was still the one she came home to. And sometimes that felt like enough, even when it wasn't.